Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Remember Me Daily Readings in Lent. We got a change of scenery here. Hope you guys like my statues. Part of a small part of my collection, but I really do like these statues. But without further ado, let us start by reading Wednesday after the second Sunday in Lent. Here we go. May you hope to receive temporal blessings from God? Yes, in the degree in which they are connected with your sanctification and salvation. It is plain that in themselves such gains cannot be object of supernatural desires. They may, however, become one in any way by which they are more or less directly connected with our end. That is why, when He engages solemnly to hear our prayers, our Lord makes no categorical reserve. He says, "All that you ask shall be granted to you, or all that you desire you shall see accomplished." And indeed, in the sublime and universal prayer He taught us Himself, and which obviously is the guide for our hopes, no less than four of the seven petitions composing it regard temporal or earthly gifts. The remark is St. Augustine's. But be careful to observe that these good things have never more have never more than a relative value for Christians, and that to consider them inside this connection is to be the victim of an illusion. To desire and demand them for their own sake is to set foot on an insecure and perilous track, and even those who desire them in relation to a higher object are bound invariably to keep in mind the character of superfluity attributed to the earthly gifts by our Lord in the Gospel. They are thrown into the bargain, so to speak. When God grants them, we should realize this as well as the fact that He gives them as a necessary or a useful adjuncts only. So while we ask for them with humble simplicity, we at the same time leave ourselves entirely to Him in the matter without any shadow of disquietude. So this is a little complicated. Um, I'll be honest with you, I did have troubles coming up with what to speak about. Let me get my notes over here. What to speak about this, but let me just give me a few seconds. I didn't set all this stuff up. I just started setting the camera up and recording. But anyway, let's go over some of the stuff that they talked about for this reading that I thought we can talk about here. Hope to receive temporal blessings from God, yes, in the degree in which they are connected with your sanctification and salvation. Um, I guess for the most part, I would say never pray for temporal goods, just in general. If we want to be consistent and we want to love God, I think praying for that sort of stuff is a no-no. You shouldn't be praying for that kind of stuff. You shouldn't be praying for more money just for the sake of money. You shouldn't be praying for more respect just for the sake of respect. You shouldn't be praying for any of this stuff. If it's not connected to your sanctification or salvation, you shouldn't be doing it. We've had conversations in previous episodes about we've had conversations in previous episodes about wanting the earthly goods, wanting earthly respect, and how that earthly respect, those earthly goods, ultimately hurt us. They hurt us because if these earthly goods are not used in the aid of God's mission, then we shouldn't ask for them. Um, and it's also just to add another highlight from the reading: be careful to observe that these good things have never more than a relative value for Christians. It is relative. It is relative to our humanity, which ultimately means to me that all this stuff doesn't really matter. All our earthly goods doesn't really matter, and it keeps to the subject of being humble and not living for the world. Again, just to reiterate, because the good thing about these readings is that they're all connected with each other and they all repeat. And if you're tired of hearing the repeating message that I give you, it's I'm repeating it for myself too, and to understand that being humble and asking for a humble life and being A humble Catholic means not living for that kind of stuff, not living for earthly glory, not living for earthly wealth. And if you get blessed with these things, it's just a passing. It shouldn't be held to the highest standard. Um, and remember to desire and demand for, to desire and demand them, which is temporal goods, for their own sake, is to set foot on an insecure and perilous track. Um, I've heard people, pray for things that, secondhand stories of people who pray for things and like just earthly things that are not really good for the spiritual health. And I've really been somebody who's like shouldn't be praying for that kind of stuff. In reality, you should be praying for more grace. You should be praying for more spiritual help. But personally speaking, you should never pray for earthly things. You should never pray for. Of course, if you have a family and you have to feed them, if you're living in poverty or anything like that, that's one thing, right? To kind of improve your financial situation so you can support your family. But yeah, just having money for money's sake is pretty bad. And most of the time, you end up not using that stuff to help the church. A couple episodes back, I think it was yesterday's episode, we were talking about how people don't want to put money in the basket, um, which is pretty bad because sometimes God, I would say, sometimes God does give you what you ask for in terms of financial advantage, and He gives it to you. And instead of increasing the money that you put in the basket, you just don't do that because you want to keep it more to yourself, and that ultimately that you damn yourself doing that. And we have to remember too, when God grants us temporal blessings, whatever you ask for, the worldly things, He gives them as a necessity or useful adjuncts only, right? So they're just because we need them. He doesn't usually like people. He won't. Well, not usually, but He doesn't grant these prayers because it's for your benefit. He doesn't grant it for your misuse. So remember that, because um when you do that, you kind of damn yourself, and that's the dangerous thing. Sometimes God does give you, um and I've seen it myself. I'm not going to recant any personal stories, unfortunately. Maybe that's for another day, but God does sometimes give you the stuff, the worldly things that you ask, to just put you in a just to test you, right? God will give you these things just to test you. And that's why I say don't ask for those kinds of things, because you don't know, right? If you say I want double the money or whatever, you pray to God for double the money that you want. Sometimes God throws you a bone just to see if you're really thankful. And from what I've seen personally, in all accounts, it's usually the people aren't thankful for what they get, and they damn themselves. Basically, God proves that you're a liar. You're full of it. God proves that you're full of it. The best way is just to not ask for these temporal things, and just be grateful for what God gives you. And lastly, when asking for temporal blessings, we must remember to leave the request entirely to Him, God, and accept without resistance. Right? Accept what God gives you without resistance. Sometimes you may ask for things, and God will give you part of it, not all of it, and we have to be thankful, because the right is ultimately for for God's choosing. We shouldn't be um, fighting with God, or being angry at what God gives us, or what He doesn't allow us to have in our earthly sense, is really the greatest sense of pride, and we're damned for that. So it's a very short one today, guys. I hope you guys' Lent is going well. I hope you guys are keeping up with your fast or your Lenten penance or whatever you guys are doing. Pray for me as I will pray for you. And until the next episode, take care and God bless.